Today, I want to cover more chess openings, and I'm going to set the board up with black at the bottom because we're going to talk about a black defense. Now, yesterday I covered uh, a lot of the E4, E5 openings. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I gave the main lines and explained, some of the strategies within and different variations that take the game in different directions. And if you want to get good at chess, you're going to have to spend some time and learn openings. And the good old-fashioned way is through books. They're relatively inexpensive. I guess the least expensive way is to rent them, check them out from your library. Go from there. This is what I did years ago. Now, yesterday I covered E4, E5 openings, as I explained, and a lot of people when they learn chess, this is the opening they learn as white and with black, as well as with black. But today I'm going to share an opening. It's called the Caro-Kann defense. It's named after two players. They both had their name attached. Okay, Mr. Caro and Mr. Kann. Now, it's related to other openings, and I'm even going to show you just the opening stages of a couple of their openings as we go, because I want you to have understand how some openings, even though they're different, can relate to others. So this can lead you to learn to play even more openings. It's good to be diversified. Now, E4 is the most common opening move, and from this position, black has 1, 2, moving the center pawns up 2 or 3 squares, 2 or 3, 1 or 2 squares. The C pawn can come up 1 or 2. The B pawn 1, so that's 7 moves right there. This move here, that's 8. And a couple of knight moves. Black has 10 reasonable opening moves to play. Each one has a different strategy, and in some cases the strategies are similar or can lead to variations similar to other ones. Again, today's focus is going to be on the Caro-Kann. Now, in the old days, when I learned chess, I have my own theory on this. I was taught that anytime you can, as white or black, anytime you can safely move your 2 pawns to the center and control the center, it's the best choice. Whether you have white or black. Now, that's safely. You can always move your center pawns on your first 2 moves. No one's stopping you that, but you don't want to give away your E pawn because the D pawn would be protected by the queen, but the E pawn is vulnerable to other pawns and to a knight. Okay, but for some reason, as I've noticed how chess has evolved, taught chess in schools for 4 years, saw a lot of scholastic events. For some reason, players will play this, and I have my own theory on why they play knight f3. I'll explain it. It has to do with what they're taught. They're taught e4, e5, knight f3. That's what they're taught. So they see some other move, like in this case, c6. I'll just play knight f3. Okay. So now, as I said, anytime you can get these 2 moves, it's your best choice. This is your strongest choice. This doesn't mean that black doesn't have adequate play from this position. He does, but this is white's best choice. But at the lower rating levels, I see very few games that open with d4 and e4. Okay. Now, black's next move is he's setting up what we call a counter center. Okay. Now this here designates the Caro-Kann. Now from this position, white has 4 moves that are generally played, but we can even argue a 5th one. Those moves would be e5, knight c3, knight d2, pawn takes, and f3. Okay, those are the 5 moves. Now, at the highest level of chess, pretty much when you get ratings over 1800 and up to the Super Grandmaster, the most common move played is Knight C3. Now, that doesn't mean that a Grandmaster won't go off and play one of those other moves. There are exceptions, but this is the main line. And if you're, as in the old days, as you're studying the CaroKann, you study it from this position. And but to wait, like I was saying, today, this is the move that you, at the lower rating level, you're going to see the most often. Okay, and there's even another move that I actually see played often. It's Bishop C4. Okay, and Knight C3 can be played here, and it can transpose into into some of the main lines still, but I want to focus on the lines you're going to face and teach you some strategy. Now, let me just introduce a couple lines and then show you two similar variations. Okay, on the advanced, this is called the advanced variation, and we're going to come back and cover all these in more detail as we go. Okay, on the advanced variation, Black plays Bishop F5. Okay, now there comes a strategy here. Eventually, not yet, but eventually Black is going to advance this pawn to C5. See, we have a thing called the pawn chain rule. Like, let me give you an example. This may go here, and this goes here. Now, here the strategy of the pawn chain, which I've explained before, is that Black will attack with his pawns in the direction the pawn chain points. And objectively, we could say White will eventually try for this. Okay. Now, the drawback, Black pays a little price. And the price he's paying is going to take two moves to get this pawn up to C5. But he does have his bishop active. It's developed, and it's often even traded. So let me show you a related opening. It's called the French defense. It's similar to the, and you're probably familiar with that. It's similar to the CaroKann. Black is setting up a counter setter, but this is the difference, a different pawn. Now, if White pushes E5, Black's best move is to come right out and play C5. So here, Black didn't have to lose a tempo, but he has to pay a price. The price is this bishop is shut in behind a wall of pawns. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to make Black lose. It could, depending on how the game continues, but the expression for this bishop is the French bishop. Okay, now let me show you one more thing. And in each case, White's been playing the best choice. This is the Nimzowitsch defense, named after Aaron Nimzowitsch. And once again, we have an advanced variation. White's done the same thing in every opening I've shown you, and Black is doing something similar here too. Now the difference is this knight is developed here instead of this pawn being on this square. Now the price Black pays, he does get his bishop out, but the price he pays is his knight is blocking this C pawn. So it's going to take a while for Black to complete his development over here on the king side, assuming he castles king side. And then he's got to figure out what he wants to do with his queen and rooks. And once he's figured all that out, then he'll redeploy this knight somewhere. And then, and only then, will he get C5. So the price that Black pays for not losing the tempo is that C5 comes in much later. And in some cases, it doesn't even come in at all. It just depends on how the game unfolds. And that's a story left for the study of the French defense or this Nimzowitsch defense. I have a video series on YouTube on the Nimzowitsch defense, but we're not talking about that today. And since I already have a video series that's posted, I'm not sure when I'll return to the Nimzowitsch here at my Twitch channel. Okay, so let's come back to the CaroKann. So, as I say, the most common move we're going to run into is this. Oh, I want to show you one more thing, because this relates. I was explaining how some openings relate. In the French defense, White does not have to play E5. White can also do the same thing he does against the CaroKann. And white can also do another thing he does against CaroKann, and that's what we call the exchange variation. And the drawback of the exchange variation, it tends to lead to a very even position. That doesn't mean that neither side can't win, that both sides win and win frequently. But Black's fianchettoed bishop, or no, I'm sorry, his bad bishop, his French bishop, has been released. But what happens is this bishop usually comes to d3, where it's a very active piece. It's pointed at the landing side of, most likely the landing side of Black's king when he castles kingside. So this is kind of important to understand, as you'll see with this first line of the CaroKann. Now this move appears surprisingly very often, and unless you want to study a line I'm going to show you in a moment, just in identification only, this is a bad move, okay? Because Black immediately gains a tempo. Okay, now this move has a name. You can find stuff on it. The key move for white to get anything out of this is to retreat the bishop. Okay, now they call this the hillbilly attack. So there's literature on it. Now what do you do if you face the hillbilly attack? Well, you first kick that, and then you retreat this, and then he retreats this. Now, this is playable, but this plays right into what white's trying to accomplish. And as I said, we're only going to look at it so deep. White will bring his queen to h5, and he's threatening a nasty check down here. Okay, and notice another thing too. This diagonal has opened up. Okay, so even though Black can defend against this checkmate, he can play g6 or he can play e6. Even though he's defended against this checkmate, he's given white a lot of activity. So let me show you what to do against bishop b3. It's important you do this. You play e6. Now this shuts your bishop in, but this bishop is shut in as well. Okay, so it's entirely possible, but not forced, that this is now a threat to take this and maybe keep it. Okay, maybe. And we ask a question: what's white going to do? And we say we don't know. But what if he takes? And what if white now plays d4? If he doesn't play d4 now, he will soon enough. Now, this is very similar to the exchange French defense, but there's a big difference. The bishop was on d3 in the French defense, okay, pointed at the, as I said, at the potential landing spot of the Black king when he castles kingside. White can still get the bishop there, but he has to move the pawn first and bring the bishop back here. So to get on this diagonal, white's moved it 1, 2, 3 times. It's 2 extra moves just to get it on the proper diagonal. So the hillbilly attack, just decline it with e6, and remember what I said, that this bishop's going to be out of play. Then Black will continue to develop his pieces, and then come back. Conduct his strategy. Okay, so let me let's end the discussion. Well, we're not done with the discussion on this yet, actually. So what happens most often though is they'll take the pawn, and now you take here. Now here we have white has a dilemma. His bishop's under attack and he's got to move it. So most likely they're going to do here.
Check.
They're going to give you this check. Now what you want to do is put your bishop on d7. And then I always ask the question, what's white going to do? We don't know. But most likely he's just going to take this.
Check.
Now look at what's happened in just 5 moves. 2 chess pieces have vanished from white's position. And two chessmen have vanished from Black's position. But Black has this pawn up here, and he has his queen up here. So, and I'm going to explain why you want to take with the queen in just a moment. But the point here is that it's almost like white has decided he didn't want to be white. He wanted Black to move first. Okay? And the reason the temples were lost was this bishop moved 3 times to capture a piece which moved once, and his last move developed black's queen for him. So already black has easy equality, and we could argue that black is now white. He has the advantage of having the first move. Now, one of the nice things about the CaroKann, I think it's a great learning opening, is that pretty much black's position opens up without any weaknesses. And unless you just create weaknesses on your own, you're going to have a very, very rock-solid game. It has a reputation for being drawish. Well, that's true up on the higher levels. At the lower levels, it's a very valuable opening for black to play and win. Black is already accomplishing some permanent positional advantages in this position. Now let me back it up one move. The reason we don't take with the knight, but although in some positions, like if you're watching my Gioco Piano video, white was taking a bishop on this square, and that was to preserve this diagonal for the queen. But here, it's important to take with the queen because it develops the queen, and we want to put the knight on a better square. Okay, so I was saying black is picking up some permanent positional advantages. Well, what are they? Well, this is the key. This is start of the key right here. Now, I ask a question, what's white going to do? Well, we don't know. But at some point, he's going to play d4. And now a good move, which frees his bishop. And now a good move for black would be e6. And now here's where black's advantages start. Black's advantage is starting to occur. Black has 7 pawns, so does white. 7 of his 7 pawns, 5 of them are on the opposite color of the black bishop. So this bishop has a great deal of mobility. Now on the white's position, he has 7 pawns. 4 of his are on the color of his bishop. So his own bishop bumps into his own pawns, and it can't go through them. Okay, so the other key is, let me get rid of the circles. The other key to help identify a good bishop and a bad bishop would be that these center pawns will tell you enough here. See, if the black bishop is placed here, it can go either way. We can't find a we can't find a corresponding square for this black bishop, or black dark square bishop. If it's on e3, it's bumping into the d pawn. If it's on c3, it's bumping into the d pawn. So theoretically, black and positionally, black has the better bishop here. So this is one of the things that's starting to give black an advantage. So when you recognize good and bad bishops on the boards, usually, but not always, usually it's to your advantage to trade off your bad bishop. And we think back at the when I was discussing the similarities between openings, the French defense, black had a bad bishop. Bishop was behind his pawns. Well, it's gone. So black got rid of his bishop early and then set up the pawn structure as he would in a French defense. Okay. So already black is doing well. So, I mean, to play 6 moves and have a very slight advantage, because black does have a slight advantage. You're just based on the positional and development advantage. Black is playing white. Doesn't white have a first advantage based on the first move? Yes. As long as he plays a good opening. And what would have been a good opening? Well, his second move, d4, would have kept white with a slight plus. Okay. But again, d4 is 2d4 is what they should play, but it's not what they do play. Okay. So what's going to happen here? Well, black is just going to develop pieces, and so is white. And black has a nice file, and there's an advanced concept here, but I'm going to come back and talk about it later. And I showed it if you were watching a couple of days ago, I broadcast a member's game who played in the 90-30 league, and I showed him a strategy that can actually, it can come up in an opening like the Queen's Gambit declined. It can come up in the CaroKann. So, you know, let's just go a few moves and look at some sample ideas. Okay, maybe he wants to chase the queen. We'll stop that. White castles. Black develops something. Maybe white plays here. This. And maybe he puts his knight here. Castles. And again, notice how black is ahead in development. That was the case from the beginning. He's got everything out, except he hasn't developed these two rooks yet. And, you know, white's still catching up. Now black maybe goes and takes the C file, okay? Or maybe he will, there's a reason to put this rook here as opposed to that one. It has to do with variations where black ends up pushing this pawn. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the lesson. So, you know, it's still basically an even game, but black has a very, very tiny advantage, the advantage of the first move. Okay, so let's just go back to the beginning. Oops, wrong one, sorry. So, you know, bishop c4, black gained a tempo. But what also happens a lot is we, as I said, knight f3 we see regularly. White will push. Okay, and then I've seen this many times.
Check.
Now, the difference between this and the hillbilly attack
Check.
is that white has an extra tempo. So black is not ahead in development now. See, in the hillbilly attack, the bishop came to c4 and then gave the check. And this knight remained at home. But this is, so black is no longer playing white. You know, he doesn't have the advantage of the first move. But positionally, black is set up for a rock-solid game. So, you know, development will probably continue similar to what we saw. Okay, except white has that extra tempo. Let's go here. Let's see. Let me change this slightly. No, I'm going to stay with the way I did it. We'll do it a little differently here. I'm going to put the knight on c3 instead. So here, you know, white is not behind in development. He's managed to get his queen out. You know, he may put a rook here, who knows. And black can go about his business and maybe put this rook here. But there's actually a reason to put the other rook there. But the game will continue. It's about even. So remember, now in these exchange variations, you don't want to trade, black does not want to trade the dark squared bishop because, you know, this could be a valuable end game where black's bishop will be attacking pawns and white will be using his bishop to defend pawns. Okay, so this is just a sample of what can happen. So let's go back again. And again, you see this. Now, what you often see is this move. If they don't take the pawn, they'll often push by. So we just transpose the position. This is, we would reach the same position if white had played d4 on his second move. Now, let me clarify that. Okay. As long as white's playing the advanced, and as long as white is playing knight f3. So that's the exact same position. Now, here I'm going to show you the ideal strategy for black. Okay. Now, here, there's other moves too, but this move is playable. Okay. Now, this is where it kind of gets fun for black. See, remember what we talked about? Since black is putting pawns on light squares, he's happy to trade the light squared bishops. So here, it's your best move to take it, even though it develops white's queen. Now, white's ahead in development here. So we could say to ourselves, white is better. Well, he's got the advantage of the first move. That's what he has. Okay, black is equal here. The CaroKann is it will pretty much assure you equality. Okay. Now, but you have to play it right. I'll show you some ways to play it wrong in a little bit as we continue. Okay, but let me see. I want to check something. Anybody typing in the? No, nobody's asking any questions. But at least you're here watching. Okay, let me bring. Oh, wrong one. Let me bring this back. Wrong one. There we go. So black has a nifty little resource here. It's to give a check.
Check.
And now white can get that check several ways. We're just going to pick one. We're just for the sake of argument, we're going to pick this one. It could have been knight here. It could have been bishop here. We're picking this one. But and there's a reason I'm picking this one, because now black will play queen a6. That may not be a move that that white expects, and this move comes up a lot in the CaroKann. So white's kind of in a little pickle here. If he doesn't want to trade queens, say he retreats his queen to c2, well, you know, the presence of this queen means that white cannot castle kingside. Okay. Now he doesn't have to go to c2, but he didn't have to play c3. See, he could play this, and now on this move, white can pick this square to put the queen on, and black still is stopping him from castling kingside, but white could bring the knight to e2 and then get castled. But you know, for the sake of this example, we're just going to stick with c3. You can study books, look at more of these variations, play them out, but you know, we can't cover them all in a short session here. So what often happens is black just takes, and you know, black has full and complete equality here. Plus, black is ready for his thematic pawn break. Now, there's an awful lot of pawns on dark squares. You know, those pawns are interfering with this bishop. Okay, and none of these pawns are interfering with black's bishop. So, you know, black's got at least equality here, and has a potential strategy. So black would like to advance the pawn to c5, trade on d4, and use the c file, and have this d4 pawn be a potential target. You know, let me illustrate something here. Get rid of the arrows. Okay, black would like a knight here. He would like a knight here, and we imagine this pawn gone. And maybe this bishop can maneuver over to this square. Not right away, of course. It'll take 3 moves to get there because of the presence of the white pawn on d4. But if you imagine, you know, the pieces as I place them, black has a knight, and it would have a bishop all attacking d4. And if white doesn't have enough defenders, that pawn is going to fall. So this variation of the exchange variation doesn't really yield much for white. Okay, let's come back to the beginning and talk a little bit more about the exchange, but I want to talk about it from the direct approach. Okay, this meaning the direct approach, where white's playing his best moves. Okay, there's a tricky line that white tries to play with g4. Okay, now white couldn't play it in the other line because his knight's sitting on f3. So what should black do here? If he takes the pawn, he loses his piece. So we have to ask a question. What do we do? Coming back here would be a dreadful mistake. You know, we're just undeveloping. So you're running out of squares. One of these is correct. Now I believe it's easy to see why they've determined which one's best. I mean, you might have an opinion, but whether you're right or wrong, it doesn't matter. What matters is you understand why bishop e4 is the proper move. See, bishop e4 is the proper move because it attacks the rook, and it makes white weaken his pawn structure. Now this pawn is no longer covering these squares, and this pawn is also taking away a square from the knight. Now we'll come back here. Okay, now white may try to do what they call the Noah's Ark trap. The Noah's Ark trap is when you, let's just imagine this pawn up here. The pawn has trapped the bishop, and it can't get out. And the way I learned the name of the Noah's Ark trap was when I was a boy about 11 years old in a chess book. They said they called it the Noah's Ark trap because it was as old as Noah's Ark. Well, we didn't play chess there, but back in those days. But what they said makes what they were saying makes sense. So suppose white tries to corral that bishop in. Well, this is a threat. So the question is, what do we do? Do we play h5 or do we play h6? Well, I believe h5 is the proper choice. And, we ask a question, what is white going to do? And the answer is we don't know. Well, what are his choices? Take, push, or let it sit? Wouldn't you agree? If he pushes, suddenly we have control of this square. Notice that white cannot attack that square with a pawn. Okay? He can't. So, black is going to play something like pawn here, and this knight is going to come in there and find a very, very happy square to sit on. It'll be centralized, putting a lot of pressure on the white position. So, we're very happy if white will allow this. And this is all possible because of the, it's the CaroKann Advanced. And white tried to win the game quickly. In baseball, you might have a power hitter, and if he comes up and knocks in, your first two guys get on base, and your third guy up hits a home run, you're up 3-0, and with a good pitcher, that's enough to win. Good pitcher and good defense, that's enough to win. Well, here white's trying for the home run in the first inning, but he gets worn out after a move like this because he just has weaknesses in his position. If he's going to weaken his position this readily in the first 7 moves, what's going to happen in the next 20 when the game starts getting critical? Black's winning chances have gone up phenomenally, and it's all because you knew the strategies and ideas if you try this opening defense. Okay, so what else can white do here? Well, he can take. Now here, we can just take it, or we might take it with the rook, and later the king might work his way over here, or you might actually castle kingside. But for the moment, he's definitely safe in the center. And look at this. White has nothing developed. Nothing. He's just moved pawns the whole game. And once again, we have control of this f5 square. Okay, so we don't really have to fear the pawn capture. And what was the other choice? To let it be. Okay, so how does white let it be? Well, he develops something. I'm just going to pick a move. Let's just pin the pawn. Okay, now that pins black's e-pawn. Okay, and it takes advantage of the fact that this pawn can't chase it out. So what should black do here? Well, we can develop the queen and counterattack this square. Okay, and then we can get our e6 move in. Or what else could we do here? We could break the pin like this. Now we're starting to put pressure on this square. Okay, it's defended, but we are starting to put some pressure there, and we're ready to move this pawn. So, this, you don't have to fear. This line is black. Just play h5. Now the alternative is, let's back this up. After h4, if you play here, now you have to come back. Your bishop is safe, but you've lost the chance to get control of f5. Okay? So that's why I believe h5 is better. Okay, so let's back this up, and let's look at one other possibility white might do. This is what we call a positional sacrifice. Okay, it's called a positional sacrifice because white is willing to give up a pawn to hinder black's position. Okay, so I think your best choice is just go ahead and take it. Now we ask the question, what's white going to do? And the answer is we don't know. So let's just pick a move. For the sake of argument, I'm going to pick this. Now I'm going to show you a very good move for black here. And that is to just return the pawn. I talked yesterday about gambits. Sometimes the best way to treat a gambit is to return the material. Okay. If this kind of uncramps black's game a little bit. He can move this pawn so he can move his bishop. If white takes, black will just play e6, and black is not tied up. He returned the pawn, and he's not as cramped as he once was. So what's white's best move here? I don't know. Let's try f4. Well, we can still do this. See, we're returning the pawn. And now we have a structure similar to the advanced variations we already looked at. So, we can return the pawn. It's not a bad choice. If we don't return the pawn, then how are we going to get this bishop developed? If we don't move this, we can't move that. So that means this bishop either has to sit or find its way here. Now, we could argue, oh, I can go back here. Well, yeah, but he has this move. And then this bishop is going to come under fire in a moment. Okay? So, let's just consider this positional sacrifice and learn how to deal with it. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. So we've covered a good deal of advance. Let me make sure I didn't miss them. Let's see. We talked about the exchange, and we talked about this push. And we'll do the same thing. So we pretty much got the advance down. Now, I'm going to show you something kind of neat here. We want to look at the main line exchange variation. Now, main line, that's E4 and D4. Okay, we've covered the advanced. Let's look at the exchange. Now, there's many ways for this to go. When I mentioned a really cool strategy I was going to show you when I was talking about going over C8, I recommended this rook, and I said we're going to prepare for this. Remember that? Well, let's watch this. Now, none of this is forced. I'm going to show you two lines. Okay, this is a book position theory. Okay, here white develops his bishop. Again, we've seen this bishop come here in the French exchange. Now black attacks a pawn. White protects it. And now black develops another knight. And white brings his bishop out. And here comes an attack on the queen. Now, this is one of those exceptions. I have a rule, I just noticed this. I'll mention this here. Anytime that you attack a queen or check a king from these corresponding squares, and these three pawns have not moved, it's probably the wrong move. I know of one other exception, and the exception would be when, it kicks it, so you have to move it. The exception would be if you're trying to get a defender on this square. And that might be the case if, for instance, this knight was here threatening a fork, and we were able to check with the bishop and then come back to defend. But in this case, f3 is not white's best move. Okay, this is determined to be the best move. The best move for white is to put the queen here. Now here's an interesting situation. Since black has moved his light squared bishop, his b7 pawn is loose. How do we save it? Do we push it? No, it's going to weaken our position. Do we protect it? Yes. Well, we can't protect it with rook b8. So the question is, what's a better choice? Queen d7 or queen c8? And it's amazing. The answer is actually queen c8. Although I've seen an argument for queen d7. Now the reason you don't want to go to d7, I had a game, 25 years ago or longer, 30, I don't remember exactly, where my opponent came here with his queen, okay? And the drawback with this is eventually there is going to be a knight attacking that queen, making it move again. Now, that's what I explained to him, that he lost the tempo. And he says, well, that shouldn't have lost the game. And he's absolutely right. But he made one other blunder, and that made the tempo I gained made that blunder even worse, and it gave me the winning position. Okay, so again, this is all theory. We're just playing queen c8. Okay, now white would like to develop his knights. Usually we develop knights before bishops, but he doesn't want to play knight f3 here because black may just chop it off. So white continues here, and black moves his pawn up, and then now this comes here, and then we both get castled. And again, this is considered even. Now here I'm going to show you an advanced strategy, because you're all bright, you have an idea. Maybe some of you already know what to do here. This is something we call the minority attack. Now, what do I mean by that, huh? Well, let's find out. Let's divide the board into halves. Okay, we have the king side, and we have the queen side. Now we're looking for minorities, huh? What kind of minority do we have? Well, black has a minority of pieces on the queen side. Well, we're not talking about pieces. We're talking about pawn structure. On the queen side of the board, black has a minority of pawns. On the king side of the board, white has a minority of pawns. So the trick is with a minority attack is you advance your pawn minority. You go, what? Well, wouldn't that be suicidal, sending a few against many? Well, not necessarily. Let me get rid of these arrows. Okay, let me illustrate this with arrows and circles, and then I'll show you an example with pieces from another position. Black's goal is to just advance this pawn to here. White's goal is to advance this pawn to here. And and now if white stops and plays a3, we would bring our other pawn up to support it. But this is the goal. Now, what does this accomplish? Well, here's the strategy. If white captures this pawn, white has a weakness on d4, isolated pawn. If white doesn't capture on b4, black will capture on c3. Now, if white recaptures with a piece, he has his isolated pawn. If white captures back with his pawn, he has a backward pawn on the open file. In either case, whether it's a backward pawn on the open file or an isolated queen pawn, it's a weakness. We need two to win the game. We've got one. Now we base our strategy to try to find a way to create a second weakness. Now, while black is busy doing this, white is busy trying to get this pawn up to f5. And the exact same things apply. If black takes this pawn, he has an isolated queen pawn. If he doesn't, white will capture on e6. If black takes with a piece, he has an isolated queen pawn. If he takes with his pawn, he has a backward pawn on the open file. So that, in essence, is the minority attack. And I'm not going to move the pieces in this. I'm going to show you something else in just a moment. But let me state a fact that I know about the minority attack. I've seen countless games played on the amateur level where one side or the other, let me rephrase that. Both sides had the opportunity for a minority attack. Now we have three possible outcomes. One side does the minority attack, the other doesn't. Both sides do the minority attack, or neither side does the minority attack. Now, surprise, surprise, I have never seen a game where both sides did the minority attack, and both succeeded in creating a weakness in their opponent's position. I've never seen one. That doesn't mean they don't exist. I said, on the amateur level, I have never seen one. On the grandmaster level, I'm sure you can find me a ton of examples. I didn't say grandmaster level. Are you guys grandmasters? I'm not. If you were a grandmaster, you wouldn't be watching me unless you want to steal my material. Ha ha ha. Okay, but anyway. So what I've never seen one where both sides do it. I've seen games where one side did it. And every time one side did the minority attack, guess what? They won the game. Or at the very least achieved a winnable position. And I've seen countless games where neither side did the minority attack. And the game was decided based on a mistake at some other stage of the game. So what does that tell you? It tells you most people don't know about the minority attack at the lower rating levels. Yeah, at the higher levels, of course they know. They better know. Okay, but how often are you playing 2,000 players and up, or 2,200 players and up? How often? Well, you know, if you are, that's great. You're gonna become super strong. But you kind of get my meaning. So here you're learning the minority attack for me, and you have something to take with you, and you go out and coordinate it. Now, watch this. This is fun. You remember how black had the queen side minority attack and white had the king side minority attack? Watch this. This comes out of the Queen's Gambit Declined. Completely different opening. Now, people today still fall into this trap. I've had people in my video lessons group post about it on the group wall. Over a Team 45 league about 5 years ago, somebody walked right into this. Well, white wins a pawn. He has a pin. But he doesn't. He loses a piece because black will get the queen, but white must return it.
Check.
Only move.
Check.
And black has won a knight for a pawn and should go on to win the game. So let's again back this up. So if you're, and I even got somebody in this trap back when I was in high school playing, in my first year of rated chess. Okay, somebody played this against me. Okay, well, so what white does is plays e3. Now this is a threat because when black gives up the queen and then gives the check, the queen no longer has to block. The king can just run up here. Okay? So, at this point, black does place c6. And now the stage for the minority attack is set. We have the exact same pawn structure as I just showed you with the CaroKann with colors reversed. Here, white has the queen side minority attack. Black has the king side minority attack. And what's kind of fun is, and I'll show you here. I'll show some examples how we reach it. Black actually gets the minority attack in first. You know, even though he's moving second, he gets the minority attack in first. Let me illustrate. Okay, white to play. Let's just develop some pieces, and that's what I'm doing here. Now, at some point, black goes here. White takes. Now, he can't take with the knight because you get forked. So the main line is something like this. And this comes over here. Now, white's getting ready for the minority attack. And we take. Now, if you take with the pawn, you kill the minority attack, at least on your end. And you actually kill it on both sides because now black plays the minority attack. White can take, and he won't have an isolated pawn. So you want to take with the queen here. Now we go kick the queen again. And this comes up here. And as I was promising, black gets the minority attack in first. Okay. Yeah, here we see if he takes, we have an isolated queen pawn. If he doesn't take, say he plays here, he'll have a backward pawn on the open file. And say black develops his bishop. I'm just picking a square. Well, actually, let's go to c6. Would have a loose pawn. And then here, I'll just take with the bishop so that we show two different weaknesses. Black has the isolated queen pawn. White has the backward pawn on the open file. And again, I have never seen this position. Of course, black could take with the pawn and have the backward pawn on the open file. But that, in a nutshell, is the minority attack. And, you know, I've had students that I've taught the minority attack. They have the opportunity to play the minority attack, and they don't do it. They're afraid. I don't know why they're afraid, but I said, what are you afraid of? If you follow it through correctly, you're creating a weakness in your opponent's position. What did the way you played it create a weakness in your opponent's position? And the answer was no. Okay, you got to do it. Now, you have to you can't just blitz these moves out. I'm moving them quickly, but these are from positions I've already gone through and explained this minority attack from. Okay, I've already done this. But I understand that how to do it safely. And when you get a minority attack, you do have to plan, and every tempo counts. So here White put a rook on the B file to support the advance of the pawn. Now let me give you an example of why we put the rook there. Okay, let's back it up still. Okay, what if White played here? Now and then brings the rook over. Well, at some point, when this pawn gets up to b5, this pawn on a3 is not protected. Okay, so keep that in mind. Sometimes you actually have to push that pawn. It just depends. It depends on the opening. But the pawn structure is exactly the same on both sides. As I just showed you in that exchange variation in CaroKann, everything was a perfect match. The difference was it was colors reversed. And let's back this pawn up to a2. If I do it, the arrows will disappear. So let's go back to the beginning, and let's come back to the exchange CaroKann. Okay, there's one other move Black can play, and that is queen c7. The purpose of queen c7 is to deprive White of putting this bishop here. Okay? That's the only difference. So you can do some research and see this line. I have played knight e2 in this position in order to be able to get this in. You might run into something like this, and then this chases it out, and this comes back, and then he can get it in. But you can finally get it in. But Black has resources. He can play here, attack the b pawn. It's a relatively easy line to study, but for the most part, these things hold true. You're getting the same pawn structure as we did in the other exchange variation. And again, you don't mind if you trade the light squared bishops. Okay, so queen here, maybe b3, knight f6, castle. Well, you can see castles. Gotta be careful. This pawn is defensively pinned in this direction. But maybe Black will play something like this, hoping he trades, giving potential attacking chances down here. You can develop your own strategies, but examine this variation. Check out the moves. Now brings us to another line, which is related to the exchange. And you say, what is the exchange? How's it related? Well, it has to do with this move. This is considered the Panov-Botvinnik attack. Two players, Mr. Panov, Mr. Botvinnik. Botvinnik was arguably we could argue he's in the top 10 of best chess players of all time. He was world champion in 1948. He won the playoff tournament they had of all the candidates after Alyekin had passed away. He never won a world championship match after that. He either lost, he would lose them or draw them, and he would win the rematches. He lost his title to Smyslov, won it back. He lost his title to Tal, he won it back. Before that, he drew a match with Bronstein and retained his title. But he got his revenge in return matches. Then in 1963, he lost the title to Petrosian, and he didn't compete again. He retired, at least from match play and tournament play. And don't quote me on that. He may have played a tournament here and there. I know he played Fischer in an Olympics somewhere around that time. So I don't know what Botvinnik's career was really like, but he never competed for the world championship again. So the idea here is, for this opening, is white wants to, he'll accept the isolated queen pawn. Now, I talked about the isolated queen pawn in my discussion yesterday, where white had it coming out of the Giocco piano. The more pieces on the board, the stronger the isolated queen pawn. Okay, the pawn will control a couple of forward squares, and the bishops have open diagonals, and eventually white will have, when he completes his development, he'll have a couple of files for his rook to operate on. But he does this at the price of having a weakness. So and there's many ways to play this. I don't recommend taking this. Some lines you do, but let's wait until this bishop moves and get a tempo. Like, give you an example. Let's play here. If white puts this bishop here, well, let's just take. Well, especially we want to take here. This is under check. Let me move a different piece. I'm trying to illustrate my point here. Let's go here. He goes here. Now we'll take. And now white's lost a tempo because his bishop took one move to, took two moves to capture something that normally would have taken with one. So, ideally what black would like to do is erect a blockade. This three-word strategy for dealing with an isolated queen pawn is restrain, blockade, destroy. Restrain means, like, for instance, here, now it's not restrained. It's infested black's position. Okay, here's an example of that. Now, instead of influencing these squares, okay, it's influencing these squares down here. So black can't safely put a knight on c6. Okay, if he, you see what I'm saying? Okay, so so first restrain, then blockade and destroy. So black would like to erect a position where this pawn is traded here, or vice versa. We've traded this way, where black gets a knight on this square, supported by a knight somewhere else. Now it could be on b6, it could be on f6. Okay, but we want knights controlling that d5 square, and then we want to develop the rest of pieces. Now, what's your strategy after that? Your strategy after that is to, for black, is to try to trade pieces and make that isolated pawn weaker, because as pieces are traded, that's what it does. It becomes weaker. If the rooks are traded, white no longer has the open files to place his rooks on and to penetrate the black position. So, the more pieces that are gone, the weaker it becomes. Okay, so let's look at a potential line here. Knight f6, knight c3. Now here we're going to shut our bishop in, but this bishop will come into play later. Again, we're trying to erect this blockade. Just one sample line. Bishop e7, bishop g5, castles, bishop d3. Now we take because we gained the tempo. Okay, now knight here. Now what black is trying to do here is he's trying to maybe get this knight up here and go here. There's that blockade I was talking about. Okay, now white might play a3 here just to prevent that. Now black can also, let's see, suppose, just a sample line, suppose black does that, we're going to go here, and suppose he kicks it, well, that's just driving us right where we wanted to go. And then maybe we, as we place these pieces on the open file, black has accomplished what he wants. White's left with his permanent weakness, but white has his positional compensation. His knights are centralized, his bishops are on good squares, his rooks are on open files. The game is basically even, but white has that one weakness. Okay, so we just play chess. We we get our pieces developed like this and react to whatever plan our opponent throws at us. If he's a stronger player, you can expect he's going to find some good moves. Okay, I got a question. Should white play b4 and prevent c5? Move 9. Okay, I don't know if I'm in this variation. Well, I'm sorry I missed that. That sounds like in one of those advanced variations. Black could, in cases where you're trying to prevent b4, black can still find ways to get it in. You know, he might play a5 first, or he might play b6 to support c5. But anyway, I got to come up. I can't read your name because you're in neon green. Play chess at work. Hey, that's a good handle. Play chess at work. I used to do that. Now I play chess at home. All right, this is work. So I guess that's what I do. You know, I haven't. I can't recall leaving the house in almost a week. How much money have I spent then? Nothing. Well, I've spent. I've consumed food, which I'll have to replace. So you could say, yeah, I have spent something, but I haven't spent it yet. Okay, so this is an idea of the exchange variation, and let's come back to the beginning. So we want to cover another line that that can come up, and this is what they call the two knights. Okay, this is called the two knights. Why is it called the two knights? Well, you see the two knights that got developed? That's why. Now, the best move for black in this position is to play g4, and I'm going to pick on Knight Fighter here in a little bit because he's a personal friend of mine for some 50 years. He got in this position, something similar. I'll explain it here in a minute. Okay, but this is your best move. Now, if h3, you come back here, and you know we've seen some of these strategies. If they take, you're back in the exchange variation again. So you know you really, it's worth looking at some of the lines, but you know it's a pretty simple thing to understand if you understand all the strategy I've given. So let me back it up and show you one other line. Then I'm going to come back to this two knights. Okay, it comes to the main line, and as I said earlier, one of the lines that black plays here, and we'll cover more of this later. We reach this position. I haven't shown this position yet, but black comes out and attacks the knight, and black retreats, and we'll discuss this more in full later. Okay, but just keep this idea in mind. The bishop attacked the knight attacked the bishop retreated. Okay, so here's something that happened to Knight Fighter. He played the CaroKann for years. And he ran into, he looked at this and said, well, I'm just going to take, and this is not the best choice. And what he's thinking is that after bishop f5, the knight's going to go here. This is true. And he comes back and he says, well, he's just going to play d4, and I've transposed into the mainline CaroKann. Well, there's no rule that says white's going to has to play, or will even play d4. The fact that there's a big subtle difference between this and the other position. White hasn't moved this pawn, but he's moved this knight, and that's a critical difference. So now white plays h4, and that's something, as we'll see, that he does in the other line. Now h6 is to provide a haven for the bishop. But again, because this knight is here and not here, and this, because we haven't wasted time going here, white suddenly has a strong move. Now, what does this do? Well, it threatens to not only get the bishop pair, but to weaken black's pawns. He'll have a double pawns on the G file, and he'll have an isolated pawn here on the open E file. So now trouble starts to happen. White has all kinds of good moves at his disposal. He can threaten a mate in one in two different ways. You know, queen f3 or bishop c4. You know, look at that. They both threaten mate in one. Let's try this one first. Okay, that's the threat. So e6 to stop it. Here comes another mate in one threat. So black stops it. Now we're going to come over here. Now, this is where you got to get this is where white can get slaughtered. Or I'm sorry, black can get slaughtered. Let's check this out. B5. Well, all of a sudden, here comes this. Now, he doesn't have to take, but I'm just going to show you how I guess you could have taken the bishop. But this king doesn't look long for the world. If you come back here,
checkmate.
That's a funky checkmate. You know, you come back here. You know, we're still checking you.
Check.
You know, if you come up here, there's a checkmate.
Checkmate.
Okay. All right. There's a lot of danger for black in the CaroKann. I'm going to show you some of those positions next. So you know, if they play the advanced, just don't take on e4. Let him take on d5 and go into your exchange. Okay, so you can look this line up too. But let me show you a couple ways black can lose this game quickly. At least one, maybe two ways. Okay, we're back to this line. Okay, now from this position, black pretty much has, I believe, 3 replies. Bishop f5 we just talked about. Knight d7 and knight f6. Okay. Let's look at the knight d7. And believe it or not, I have seen the following happen. There was even a documented case about 40 years ago in the publication Southern California Chess Newsette. White played queen e2. And black played knight f6, and white won the game instantly with knight d6 checkmate, smothered mate. And while this happened, somebody was attending the tournament with a T-shirt that had this diagram on it. So I find that highly amusing. You know, there was somebody walking around with a 6-move checkmate, and if the person who lost the game saw the shirt, he didn't pay enough attention to it. So we don't want to get busted like this. Now, there's some other ways you can lose this game in a hurry. But queen e2 is not white's best move. You're shutting in your bishop. So let's look at some other ways to do this. Now, this is the best way to defend. Okay. Now, you have to be very careful. Bishop e7, you know, prepares to castle, but you may not get there. We've seen stuff like this already. Yikes. Check. You know, retreating back here gets you mated, and, you know, how long is this king going to last if he comes out here? You know, probably not long. Let's see, what's open here? You know, I mean, I'm sure you can work out a checkmate from here. You know, now look at this poor king. Can't go to the E file. They're all covered. Can't come back here. Can't go there. Can't go there. That means he's going up here. Now where's the mate? Check. It's probably right here. Checkmate. Okay, you know, I mean, this is a disaster. So black didn't have to fall into this, but I want you to be aware of it so you try as he doesn't befall you. The simple, after queen e2, the simple move is you play knight b6. This gives you that critical protection on e6. Okay, so knight takes f7. You know, white just lost a piece. There's no attack on e6. Okay, so be careful of these traps, and you know, maybe you can set them for your opponent. Maybe you win from the white side. Okay, so let's come back a little bit. Okay, so knight d7. You know, white doesn't have to play the bishop c4 line. There's other ways, but you know, we can keep the pieces on. I'm just going to play a slow version here. Okay, no attempt at a quick knockout. Okay, both sides are still developing, but notice black has a bad bishop. What he wants to do is to free it is eventually try to play c5 and free it along this long diagonal. And there's many ways to play it. And I'm just trying to give an introduction video. this is essentially the strategy. You can find some games with these examples, okay? So let's go back to the beginning. Knight c3 takes, and I gave you an introduction to this. So what's white going to do? Knight f3. Now we have e6. Now on h4, we play h6. Knight e5 doesn't quite have the bite that it did, because see, bishop c4 doesn't threaten a mate. Okay, queen f3 threatens a mate, but there's no corresponding counter pressure on this diagonal. So there's a big difference that tempo makes, okay? And this, of course, would be back here. So let's leave knight e5. A common strategy is to play here. And once again, we see this, and it's best for black to take. And, you know, this looks kind of bad for black at first. White has 3 pieces developed, and black has none. All black has to show is a missing bishop, a missing d pawn, and 3 other pawns advanced up 1 square. But black has no weaknesses. And white doesn't either. But there is potential for weaknesses to be in white's position. This knight is advanced, and even though it's twice protected, it may not be protected later. And, you know, it had to be protected by a pawn. So just imagine these pawns in a pawn chain here. Well, there's a whole bunch of weak squares that maybe the bishop or the black king or even a knight could penetrate into to give black some winning chances. So this is possible later. But I personally don't like, as white, I don't like putting the pawn on h5. One of the reasons is here it's black to play. Let's just develop this. Now, what's white going to do? We don't know. Let's just castle on kingside for the fun of it. Well, bishop d6 threatens to mess up white's pawn structure. You know, by advancing the h pawn, white did weaken his g3 square. Anyway, that's. But you know, this is easy stuff to play, easy to look up, easy to learn. Okay, I know there's a few other lines I wanted to show. Oh yeah. And I mentioned this line in passing. Now this is, Jeremy Silman calls this the original Caro-Kann defense, and it's also called the Tartakower line. And, well, not necessarily. It depends on if white takes, how does black recapture?
Check.
This would be the original Caro-Kann, and this would be the Nimzowitsch-Larsen variation. So both Nimzowitsch and Bent Larsen like to play this. Let's look at the original Caro-Kann. Okay, I didn't mention it in my introduction to the Caro-Kann, but I did show directly. I did show a white knight going into e5 frequently. But now, in this variation of the Caro-Kann, that's an impossibility. So, you know, you give something, you get something back. Okay? In this case, black has accepted weakness, but he's kept white out of e5. The other drawback for black is that if white has a queenside pawn majority. If we get down to a king and pawn ending, black is headed for defeat. So you have to be willing to risk that. Eventually white will create a passed pawn, and the black king will have to stop it, and the white king will find a way to get in behind these pawns, and game over, game set match. Okay, but we know that we don't have to get into the Caro-Kann. I mean, we don't have to worry about this line. Okay, so what's white going to do? Well, we don't know. Let's talk about some strategies. Let me get rid of the arrows. Okay. For one, black does have an extra defender on the king side. Okay. Just imagine, wouldn't it be fun if when you castled, you could just add a bunch of pawns right in front of that king? I would say your king is pretty safe, wouldn't you? Well, we didn't get those 5 extra pawns. We got one of them. Okay, so we can take some comfort in knowing that we have uh, a king which is a little bit safer once he castles. Okay, now White would still like to try to attack Black's king position, but this move immediately has a flaw because it hangs this pawn. Okay, now there's no discovered check unless we're careless. That will win the queen. Like if Black continues, develops his bishop and castles, whoops, he's going to drop his queen to a discovered attack. So what White might do is if he wants his bishop on d3, he will have to stop and play c3 first, which spends a tempo. Okay, so the other choice is bishop c4. And now here White's thinking you're going for the home run in the first inning. Okay, I'm going to try to checkmate you. There's a surprising move here. It's queen e7 check. Now you look at this, and what we'd like to do is, hey, let's develop another piece. What about knight e2? Well, knight e2 fails.
Check.
To queen b4 check, and Black wins that bishop. And the same thing would be true if this comes here. We just do the same check and win the bishop. Okay, so what's White going to do? Well, we don't know. White may meekly come back here. Okay, we'll look at other possibilities, but he has to get a check. Now Black just shuffles the queen over here, takes command of this diagonal. Okay, White can't put his bishop here, and we play chess. It's basically an even game. Black is going to develop his bishop. He's going to get castled. He's going to develop his knight, his other bishop, and so forth on down the line. What if White plays, to get a check, queen e2? That's the other alternative. Well, now Black plays here. Now, what's White going to do? We don't know. But just to give you an example, takes. If White takes,
check.
That undoubles Black's pawns, and kind of a silly position. Everything that both sides have developed has been exchanged. Black does have a weakness on e6, but it's not something that White can pile up on and grab that pawn. The best move for Black or White in this position is probably to retreat the bishop here. And the point being, he's gonna this preserves that 4-3 pawn majority, and then we fight it out. You know, we can take. You know, we can liquidate.
Check.
But here White's kept the majority intact. But you know, probably White's a little bit better. That's just one way to play it. You know, you can do more research. Now I had a game. I wanted to show it. I couldn't find it. Played at ICC about a year ago, give or take. I'll show you as much as I can. Okay, I played here, and he took.
Check.
And he stopped and played here. And I go here. This came out, and I castled. And let's see. I don't quite remember when it went, but he tried to attack me on the king side, and he ended up castling queen side. And at some point, I made a positional move. Let's develop this knight for the fun of it. Well, maybe I checked him.
Check.
And he blocked this way. At some point, I made this positional move, and this is designed to restrain this pawn from coming up here, and White maybe getting an overwhelming space advantage. But as it turned out, he did try to attack me, and I attacked him, and his attack failed, and mine didn't. Game was over, I don't know, 20 moves. It was just a blitz game, but and I don't advocate blitz chess, but blitz is okay if you're learning your openings. Okay. All right. So let's take this back to the beginning. You're given an introduction to the Tartakower original CaroKann. So this brings the other variation, the Nimzovich-Larsen. Okay,
check,
here we're taking back this pawn, so there's no imbalance of pawns on the queen side. You know, this e6 pawn restrains it. So, you know, for instance, knight f3, we're going to play here, and this will come up to e6. This will go here. We'll develop the queen and the bishop. We might have some kingside attacking chances, and you know, this is open for more study. But you know, black, you don't have to. You know, if you're going to play the Caro-Kann, you don't have to play just one. You want to play them all. You want to test them all out. And if you're white, you want to know how to play against them. Okay, so let me think. I think it leaves one more line. No, two more lines actually. Maybe three. Okay. Oh, wait. Not this. Knight c3. Okay. Now, instead of playing knight f3, making the two knights, I have a friend that advocates this move. Now, he calls it, it's kind of humorous, he calls it the Caro-Queen. You know, the queen has come out to f3. I have a FIDE master friend from Finland who plays at ICC, and we've chatted a lot, and he calls this garbage. And I played it against him once. We got randomly paired on the 3-minute pool or something, and I'm not good at blitz. He just destroyed me. Oh, it was humiliating. But you know, it was a good game on his part. I think the best move is just take, and we go about our business. Now, you know, there's, you know, we do similar stuff, and you know, black should be safe here, but it has a certain amount of poison. You know, now if the queen was on e2, we would have this move, but we don't have the queen on e2. If he backs it up, you know, we just go play here and we're good. I said the best. Whoops. Oh well. I said the best move is to take the pawn. I've had people play this against me. This gets fun for white. Okay. Now, taking this knight is poison, because after takes, black has a forced win. I'll let you figure it out. But I don't think anybody in their right mind as black would want to go into this. But suffice it to say that you can give up that piece. And, you know, you can study on your own and find the ways, okay? So what's going to happen is, when you play this, they need to stop. They'll stop and do this. Now you transfer the knight here. And this leads to some promising, it could lead to some promising developments for white. The queen will step over here, which may very well restrain this bishop from coming out. Black may have to stop and play this. And then we'll get the knight here, and we'll castle, and you know, white does okay. So this is the Caro-Queen. Now I have one other line to show for sure. I was thinking of as we were doing this. Okay. Now some people have argued that this move is superior to this move. Now, if we take, it doesn't matter. We're just back in the same position. And the reason they argue knight d2 is better is because black has another entirely different strategy you can do. Gurgenidze, Gurgendidze. Forgive me if I spelled it wrong or pronounced it wrong. But this is the Gurgenidze line. It's just to play g6. And it has some points to it. If now e5, black plays h5. A very positional game. Black is seeking to control f5 with his, well, he has control of it. He's seeking to place the knight there. He might even put the bishop there. And as a matter of fact, I think in the main lines, that's where the bishop goes. But here we can see one of the reasons why people say the knight going to d2 is superior. This knight on c3, it's not really a good piece. You know, it's not going anywhere. But on d2, it can shift over to the king side rather quickly. I guess it could go back to E2 and do the same, but for this, but there is an argument that the knight is misplaced on C3. Okay, so that's the Gurgenids. But anyway, the Larson, I'm not saying Larson Bronstein. I think it's Nimzovich Larson, but regardless, it's not important. I can get names of openings confused. But in a nutshell, that's the Caro-Kann defense. You play it carefully, do some prep on it. This is a good basis. Watch it again. And at this point, I need to break. So I'm going to stop the recording. And if you have questions, please post them. Okay, because I'm only a mind reader on October 14th, and that was a few days ago. Okay, so you got a whole year to wait. All right. But I'll keep the streaming line open. I'm stopping the recording.